Hi, this is Dave. Welcome to this podcast show where we focus on providing you practical wisdom to help you lead better, live better, manage better, and build successful businesses and careers. So I want to talk about amplifying your results today with something I call an activity dashboard. So bear with me here. We're going to get into some of the details and help you create a dashboard that will give you a tool to actually amplify your sales results. Now, in my 30 plus years of practice as a sales consultant, I've discovered certain practices that have such a far-reaching impact that they should be a part of every sales effort. And when I say sales effort, I'm talking about individual salespeople or sales teams or professionals, who have to build their own business, a small business person or a sales executive. Anybody who has a need to create sales somewhere in their world, this is for them. We're talking about best practices here, and one of those best practices is the development and management of something I call an activity dashboard. So an activity dashboard is a system that produces a monthly set of measurements of the most important activities in a sales function. Now, the dashboard could and should be used for every important area of a business, but since I'm a sales consultant, I'm going to be talking about the dashboard to measure behaviors in a company's or an individual's sales system. Now, an activity dashboard does not report on money. It's a deeper layer of measurements. Dollars of sales and gross profits are the result of the activities which cause sales and gross profits. The activity dashboard measures those things, the key behaviors that must occur in order to produce the dollars of sales and gross profits. So we're going to look at a couple of very simple examples here. First is a business professional in private practice. So, an accountant, a consultant, etc., somebody who is in private practice trying to build a business. So let's create a sales system dashboard, and we're going to start with a monthly goal. So let's say the goal is to create one new client a month. Okay, so let's put on our table, all the way to the far right, a column that says agreements or new clients, and we're going to put one, and then we're going to move backwards. So, in other words, to the left. So what needs to happen in order to create a new client? Well, first you need to make sure you have a certain number of contacts with prospects. And so our professional has decided he can make 40 new contacts a month by attending networking events, joining service clubs, advertising locally, and so on. And so that keeps the pipeline full at the top. So on the first column, all the way to the left, we're going to put prospects. And we're just going to report the number that we have at the end of the month. Okay, so that's first. Then if he's going to acquire a new client, he's got to have a certain number of meetings with prospects in which the conversation is about his or her services and the possibility of becoming a client. So let's call those intro meetings. So if he's going to acquire a new client, he must hold a certain number of intro meetings with prospects. So that's the next column. So we have number of prospects, number of intro meetings. And then he's determined that he had to make at least 2 proposals, formal written proposals to be a service provider to a prospect every month. Out of those 2 proposals, hopefully he'll acquire 1 customer. So the next column is proposals. So we have on our little dashboard here, we have 4 columns. Number of prospects, intro meetings, proposals, and agreements or new clients. Okay, now, so what we've done here is to find the key behaviors, the things that must happen to acquire a new customer. So here's the steps in the process. You started with a goal. Start with a goal. There are two basic fundamental processes that everyone involved in sales must understand and manage. First one is acquiring a customer, and the second is expanding the business with a current customer. In this case, we're focusing on the first, acquiring a customer, and we developed a monthly goal, one per month. Okay? Then, so first we started with a goal, then we said, what are the key activities, the things that must happen for us to reach that goal? And they include making new contacts, we call them prospects, creating introductory meetings with those prospects, making specific written proposals. So there's those three. Now, and this is a very, very, very simple illustration. There's three very simple steps in a sales process that lead to a new client. And the way he did this is asking the question, and the question is typically, what has to happen for a prospect to agree to hire me? And then he broke that process down into multiple steps and identified a handful of key activities. And he defined each of these key activities, and he estimated the number of each that needed to occur for his goal to be attained. Notice that he defined definitions, measurable definitions for each of the key activities. So let's say our professional is an accountant specializing in medical practices. So prospects, was defined as a one-to-one personal engagement with someone who owns or makes decisions for a medical practice, or someone who could introduce the professional to such a person, where names were exchanged. Intro meetings were engagements with qualified prospects where the subject of the professional services and the prospect's needs were discussed. Proposals were written proposals for the prospect to hire the professional, and agreements were just that, agreements to hire the professional. So, step 1 is the goal. Step 2, identify the key activities. Step 3, define the key activities. Step 4, measure. So we defined 4 different key activities, and now we have to be able to measure them. And so in this particular case, let's say the numbers are relatively small, and he's the only one doing it, so he decided to use a simple hash mark system. So he created a spreadsheet, printed it out. It says 4 columns. And so column 1, prospects, 2, intro meetings, 3, proposals, 4, agreements. Simple. And then down the first column, he has 1 to 31 for the days of the month, and then a total. And so he's just going to put a hash mark whenever one of those things happen, and then at the end of the month he'll total it up. And the totals, hopefully, so he'll compare the totals to the goal that he set for each of those different key activities. So at the end of every month, he can look at his goal, his actual performance, and then make some changes. Make some improvements. Do it better. Okay? So now, let's go on with a different example. Let's take a small business CEO. So he's got, let's say, your CEO of small business, you got 3 salespeople. And you do the same thing, dashboard for new customers. So you think, okay, let's create the same key activities, agreements, proposals, first meetings, prospects. Okay, so again, he went through the exact same process, set a goal. So we're talking about new customers here. His goal is the number of new customers acquired every month. And let's say he's going to try to get 3 new customers a month. Okay? Then he identified the key activities that have to happen. Now, doesn't matter who does it at this point. The key is that a certain number of proposals have to be made every month to get 3 customers. So let's say he says, okay, we're going to do 10 proposals. So he identified that, the key activities, proposals, intro meetings, prospects, defined each in the same way that our CPA defined them, and then a way to measure. And since now it's not just him doing it, other people in the system are doing some of it. So he's got to be a little bit more creative in collecting the measurements each month. So let's say he's got an administrative assistant, and the administrative assistant could pull the information off the CRM system and put it on the activity dashboard at the end of every month. So prospects would be defined as a report from the CRM system that included those who had additional information. A prospect with maybe the salesperson filled out a customer master screen. Okay, so at the end of every month, the admin could do a search on how many of those were done and how many prospects now existed in the CRM system. First meetings, again, the admin could pull that information off the CRM system and note it on the dashboard. Proposals, each salesperson would be asked to total the number of proposals he or she made during the month, submitted to the admin who would compile those numbers and add it to the dashboard. And finally, agreements could be measured by the company's customer service person, whose job it was to enter a new customer into the system and process the first order. So our CEO, small business CEO with 3 salespeople, went through exactly the same process. Let me repeat the process. Set a goal, identify the key activities that lead to that goal. And by the way, you can get really detailed here. There should be no more than 5 or 6 key activities. And what you're looking for is identify the things that must happen, not everything that can happen. You could take them to lunch, you could have phone calls. Those are all okay, but to measure the key things that must happen. So 4 or 5 key things. And then define, what do you mean by each of those? What do you mean by prospects? What do you mean by intro meetings, etc.? Define them, and then figure a way to measure them. All right? So now we have an example of a small business CEO. We also have an example of a professional doing it by himself. So what do you do with this information? Well, you create a ritual, a routine. You review it every month, once a month. And maybe you even put it on your calendar. On this day, I'm going to spend an hour reviewing the dashboard. And you make observations. Now, you could do this by yourself, or if you got a larger organization, you could have a team that meets together once a month and looks at the numbers. Regardless, when you look at the numbers once a month, you're going to look for 2 things: quantity and quality. So quantity refers to the sheer numbers of activities compared to your goal. So in our professional system, he actually created 20 contacts, but he said he wanted 40. So clearly the quantity was seriously below his goal. So the next month, he's got to figure a way to increase the quantity of prospect meetings. Then, so you look at the quantity first, then you look at the quality. Quality is defined as the relationship between 2 columns. So for our small business person, the ratio of agreements to proposals was expected to be 3 out of 10, or 30% quality rating. So if you had 10 proposals made during the course of the month, you'd want to close 3. 3 out of 10 is a 30%. That's a quality rating, comparing one column to the other. Now, let's say the sales team actually produced 1 out of 6. That's a 17% quality rating. Clearly, something is off in the proposal development and delivery. The team's observation is our process of turning proposals into agreements is significantly below expectations. So you look at the numbers, you make observations about the quantity and the quality. Then you create initiatives. In thinking about just the one observation, our professional asks himself, how can I increase the number of prospect contacts? And so, he thinks of several possibilities. Maybe be more active on social media, join the local Kiwanis Club, buy a list of prospects and call each to ask for an appointment. And after some consideration, he decides this month he'll join the local Kiwanis Club and be assertive about meeting people in the club's meetings and events. Now, our small business person brainstorms these possibilities. And so let's say he's got a little team, 2 or 3 people. What's some of the things you can do about the quality problem? Well, we could train the salespeople to develop a more attractive proposal. We could train the salespeople to deliver the proposal. And then we could review the proposals themselves to see if they were accurate and attractive. So let's say the team decides two things: review the proposals from the last few months, train the salespeople to create more attractive proposals. Know that every month, the principals review the dashboard and focus on just one observation and create an initiative. In both cases, the review next month should show some improvement, and next month you'll have another observation and another initiative. Now, as you do this month after month, your sales system becomes increasingly more effective. You can see that, right? You'll be more in control of your sales efforts. The systems becomes more and more effective. In other words, you'll gradually achieve your goals regularly and methodically by implementing this system. In a world overrun with distractions and things to do, this focuses you on the most important thing each month, and it provides an objective, measurable way to think about and improve your sales efforts. So you see, an activity dashboard can be the central organizing practice for any person or company needing to consistently produce sales. Okay? I know this is pretty thick, pretty detailed, but hey, if you want to dig deeper, we've got a short course, what we call a PIC solution. PIC stands for problem, issue, or question. So we have a solution to help you create a dashboard. That's one of the free short courses in our XI community. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes. Check out the XI community. There's over 100 of these kind of courses that once you're inside, you get them free. Okay, that's it for today. We're done. Bye-bye.